Hi, I'm Michael Shea. I'm actually here in Spain. It's a beautiful afternoon here in late May, coming into June. I'm teaching a course, and I've actually been invited by the Craniosacral Therapy Association of Spain to respond to a couple of questions about biodynamic practice. So let's have the first question.
What is the breath of life?
The breath of life. Well, the breath of life, I think we need to look at what Dr. Sutherland said. In Dr. Sutherland's writings, he's got 18 mentions. It's called 18 mentions of the breath of life. So what did Dr. Sutherland actually mean by the breath of life? Well, if you look at the way he talked about it throughout his career, you'll see that it usually referred to like a flash of lightning, or to what he called sheet lightning, or even the word spark. So we have in his references to the breath of life a meaning of a very short, perhaps burst of light, or like a spark. He was fond of automobile metaphors. And this means in contemporary practice that it's associated with primary respiration. It's associated with the long tide. So what does that mean? Well, there's two possibilities here. There's two levels. The first level would be that the breath of life means the whole tidal rhythm of primary respiration. It means the whole long tide. And actually you see some teachers referring to it that way. But actually, I think, in the way I teach, that the breath of life is actually related more precisely to that spark or that sheet of lightning, that piece of light that occurs, whatever metaphor you might have as a practitioner, right at the beginning of primary inhalation. That means when primary respiration changes phases and begins its expansion, right at the beginning, if you catch it, there'll be this burst that comes from the third ventricle, and it goes right down to your coccyx. So there could be two meanings, as I said, but the general meaning that I use, which is also consistent with the way that the American osteopaths use it, the biodynamic osteopaths, is that it's a very short, precise event that begins right at the beginning of the expansion phase of primary respiration. Otherwise, you'll see that some people do refer to it as the whole cycle of primary respiration. So that's my sense of the breath of life as it's been handed down to us historically. Next question.
Okay, the next one. What is illness?
Well, I think as I write about it in the various books that I've put together, that I'd have to say that illness has probably several levels to it. The first level of illness is to understand it from a traditional point of view, from traditional healing, as the archaic cultures have passed on healing traditions to us. Illness primarily meant that there was a loss of connection with nature, that there was a progressive sense of alienation from the world of nature, which is the world of the divine as it was thought of back in those times, and actually experienced, that nature was experienced as being divine. So in that way, when a culture had a member that was ill, that illness meant that they had to be restored to their connection with nature. And we see that now because it's consistent with the research literature in the West, that we have a tremendous loss of connection with nature, and especially in small children, in adolescents, and how healing it is to get children and adolescents and even adults reconnected with nature. The deeper the illness, the more alienated you get from nature, you then get alienated from society and culture, and you would see people getting disconnected and withdrawn from culture. Well, this is what you call psychological problems in a contemporary Western culture. whether it be schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, which is huge, depression. These are all illnesses of withdrawing from society. And even a deeper level of understanding is that that illness would then get so deep that you would become alienated from your own mind. And we see these diagnoses of deeper levels of disorders called schizophrenia or psychosis, these type of really, really difficult mental disorders that we see in the culture. And the fourth level of illness from a very traditional point of view is the illness of alienation from our own body. Even today in class we were talking about it, and you see that some people when they come in are so speedy, they're so fast, their autonomic nervous system is so dysregulated, they are so alienated from their body. So in the healing process that we do with biodynamic craniosacral therapy, we try to get people stabilized in their body through their autonomic nervous system, reconnected with the therapist, with their family, with culture, with society, and with nature. So that's the one level of illness in a traditional sense. Being a Buddhist, I would also have to say that illness has a lot to do with mental afflictions, from a complete lack of feeling a peaceful state of mind, from feeling too much fear, too much anxiety that disturbs our basic peace of mind. And so this is a very, very strong illness from a Buddhist or from a spiritual point of view, in this sense of a lack of calmness and a lack of peace of mind. And when you don't have peace of mind, it's very difficult to see reality clearly. And it's very difficult to perceive the world as it truly is, because our senses are so disturbed. So illness to me has those two layers or two levels of understanding. I know you could talk about the medical system and biomedical understanding of diseases and disorders, but underneath all of that you would find also these other two layers of illness that I just spoke of. And I don't want to talk about the biomedical system anyway. I'm having too much fun doing what I'm doing. So, another question.
What is health?
What is health? Well, what is health? That's a good question. I'd like to answer that again two ways, because I think in clinical practice we have to look at the way we work with primary respiration and the American osteopaths, to the biodynamic community in America. Health is very simple. It's when you can experience the potency of primary respiration increasing, especially towards the end of a session. So health in clinical practice, to make it very practical for you that are watching this video right now, is when you are working with your client and you get to the end of a session and you can feel primary respiration, but you can feel the potency, the amplitude, you can feel more strength, more power per se in primary respiration. So that would be the first level of understanding at a clinical level. And again, I think in terms of health, it's very interesting because this past year I've learned or have been studying another level of health. And I've been taking a seminar on caring for the deaf and dying. And it's a very, very interesting seminar, because even when you're dying, you can experience a sense of unconditional health. And we really have to look that no matter what disease, what disorder you have, whether it be cancer, what type of dying process you're involved in, how you're dying, that underneath that is a very, very deep sense of health, a deep sense of stillness, a deep sense of inner well-being, even though your physical body may be falling apart. And in biodynamic practice, we call that the central stillness. There's a place inside of us that we can orient to, that knows we're healthy no matter what our body might be going through. So those are the two ways that I would talk about health, and also try to keep it simple for the people that are watching this video. Another question?
What means biodynamic?
We call that in America the $1 million question. For me, biodynamic has several meanings, and again, I'd like to try to keep it simple. For me, the first level of biodynamic is that it's a study of perception. Okay? All the teaching that I do and that many biodynamic teachers do, we try to get our students and we try to get ourselves a much better sense of clarity of perception and working with the perception, especially of slowing down and stilling, because we know the value of that for health, for healing, for the central nervous system, for the cardiovascular system. Slowing down is essential, and becoming still is very essential. So this is a very important part of perception. But the next part of understanding this level of biodynamics is that it's a study of living wholeness. I went to school, in massage school, in the mid-70s, and almost every training I've done in every school that I've been in for many, many years, they always talk about wholeness, that this was the promise of every single work. And it was always conceptual. It was always a thought. It was always an idea. It was always a cognition. But for me, what I've learned with primary respiration and this very slow, long tide is that it's the study of living wholeness. You actually get to sense and feel one's wholeness. So the wholeness is very, very important as a sensory reality and as even an image. If you can't build and sense wholeness in yourself, you can close your eyes and get an image of your body being whole. And that's the starting point in biodynamic practice. The wholeness of the therapist and the wholeness of the client. Now, I know in biodynamic practice that it's associated with embryology, but what's a human embryo? A human embryo is an image of wholeness, and this is why we study embryology in this biodynamic craniosacral therapy. When you study the embryo, you are looking at an image of wholeness. And when you study embryology, this is what embryologists have been talking about for over 100 years. Every single cell in the embryo, every single field of activity in the fluids of the embryo knows where every other cell, where every other fluid activity is going on. Every developmental biologist and embryologist that studies the human embryo in the last 100 years has heard of this or seen it, that it's a whole, it's a living whole, it's a moving whole. And that's why we study embryology, and that's why we study wholeness, because it's the starting point in the therapeutic process. So that to me is what biodynamics means or is for right now. So, next question.
Okay. Why do we get ill?
Well, I think that relates to the previous question about illness or disease. Why do we get ill? I think, again, just to review very simply the two answers or the two levels I gave before. Illness is a sense of alienation. You get disconnected from nature. You get disconnected from your friends, from your family. You get disconnected from society. You get disconnected from your own state of mind because there's so many mental afflictions, so many strong emotions. We have a culture that's so based in stress right now that I believe we've actually moved beyond the age of stress, that we've moved beyond the age of trauma, that we're in the age of fear, that this is what the culture offers to us. This is what the culture gives us through the media, through television, through newspapers. This is an illness. Fear is an illness, okay? That's an alienation from your own mind to become fearful. So we have to work to become less fearful and develop a more calm state of mind. One of the ways we do this is that we go out and we go into nature. We get a cranial session, we start relaxing, but more than anything else, the antidote of slowing down and becoming still, of synchronizing our attention with primary respiration, of synchronizing our attention with stillness, is so simple and yet so basic, because it heals ourselves and it creates a resonance with our client, and their nervous systems and hearts can become healed. So, kind of a quick review of the earlier discussion of illness. Is there more questions?
One more.
Okay, so one more.
How does the therapy works?
How does the therapy work? I think the simplest way to answer that, we have in biomedicine a system called evidence-based practice. And this involves a lot of research and a lot of money in order to get different types of therapies and especially different types of drugs onto the market. But what evidence-based practice does is it tends to put your entire client base in one cookie cutter, in one template, so that one size fits all, whether it's a medication or whether it's a therapy. And you can get a drug to pass a test in research if it's effective for only 33% of the people that it's given to. So evidence-based really is a big, big problem. And what biodynamic craniosacral therapy does, and also other contemporary therapies, is that we're moving into the new science of empathy and into an empathy-based practice. And I believe that's one of the ways in which that craniosacral therapy in biodynamic practice actually works and how the client gets better. Now, this field, I gave a lecture on it this morning. This field is called interpersonal neurobiology. But it's the science of empathy and it's the science of compassion. When you're with someone, whether you're looking at them or just in their presence, your nervous system and your cardiovascular system start to merge together. And in order to have a therapeutic effect, especially when you're with the client, you've got to start differentiating your own body. So the way that this therapy works is that you, as a therapist, you have to spend time sensing the wholeness of your own body, sensing the sensory dimension of your own body. This begins to differentiate you from the client. And what that does, the next step, is that it creates a resonance. Unconsciously, the client's nervous system begins to feel the slowness and the stillness of your nervous system because of the process of orienting and synchronizing with primary respiration and stillness. Your nervous system, your heart, starts to slow down, starts to become calm. The fear starts to diminish. This creates a resonance with the client so that they almost automatically begin to attune to that level of slowness and stillness. And that's what begins to generate a healing process and to stabilize their nervous system. Beyond that, the final step, if there is a final step, when you study this interpersonal neurobiology, is that after this resonance occurs, you then go into a phase of insight. And insight means that you know what to do. There's a right knowing and a right timing of what to do, where to place your hands on the client, and where to go next. All these questions that I get asked all the time are very simple if you spend more time in your body. And I would have to say that that's one of the ways that biodynamic craniosacral therapy works. I think we have to look at it from other points of view, and that could take a lot more time. But I'd like to just leave it at the simple understanding that one of the ways that this works is through that sense of differentiating, the therapist getting in touch with your own body, slowing and stilling, and that automatically creates a resonance with the client. That is empathy-based practice. That is empathy and compassion-based practice. And when you combine empathy with compassion, that equals love. And it's very individual, and it's the way that this work works. It's very individual. Every client gets a different session. They don't get the same session. They don't get the same medicine. So something different is happening every time, and that's what makes this work so exciting. You're not going into the treatment room doing the exact same thing. Every therapist knows this. You can't. It's different each time. But you work with a set of skills. You work with a set of perceptions. You feel your own wholeness. You slow down. You become still. That begins the healing process. Then it's up to the client. You have to teach the client to participate in the therapy. You have to teach them primary respiration. You have to teach them how to breathe. Get them to participate in their own healing. But don't give them too much homework, or they won't do it. So I think that's a good start if we just keep it simple to answer that question. Okay? Wonderful.
Thank you very much, Michael.
You're very welcome, and thank you for having me here in Spain. You're beautiful. The country, all of you. Thank you.